Hello and welcome to the second episode of the Time Out podcast. This is a weekly podcast focusing on major highlights in sports in Kenya and across the globe, behind the scenes happenings both on and off the pitch, numbers, human interest stories in sport, and a look at the future talent in sport. My name is Michael Kwambo, MK, and joining me as ever is Richard Wanjohi, RW.
Thank you very much, Michael, and thank you again to the audience and the people joining us on this podcast. As we say, it's a time out. We're taking time to refresh and look at what has happened in sport in the last week or so, and also maybe just to give different spices or flavors to the stories that we have seen in the headlines and the scores.
Yeah, and the big question that we have been getting from many of our listeners, many of our viewers is why timeout? Well, as you know, as I know, but probably the rest of the world doesn't know, timeout in sports means taking time out to take a break or re-strategize, re-energize, and rebuild. We're looking at sport a little deeper as we seek to help sports brands and personalities rebuild, reorganize, and give a better outlook.
Yes, indeed. And we are fast sport lovers and have played in the sport, yourself in rugby, myself in basketball and other sports. And also have worked in sports in different capacities, both as editorial consultants, among other posts that we've had. We have a bird's eye view on the world of sport, and that's why we decided to do this and to add flavor to the field of sport.
Indeed, and as you say that, we look to break down the headlines as well as other aspects of sport that you may have missed from the mainstream media. We also offer an alternative channel for sports lovers to engage and interact with sport beyond the headlines, critique, as well as celebrate sport. As mentioned at the start during the introduction, my name is Michael Kwambo and Richard Wanjohi is with me. And let's get into the news and updates. And Richie, there is no end to the blackout by the media of the FKF impasse.
I don't know what happened. We thought this would be resolved by end of last week because there was a proposition that the Media Council of Kenya was meeting the FKF officials, but unfortunately, I think the discussions have not bore any fruit, and as such, then we still have a blackout of the media houses focusing on the local scene. But we pray that this changes sooner rather than later, because a lot of fans are craving and looking out to see what's happening in the local game.
Yeah, indeed, it's quite unfortunate that this continues to happen, that both the players and the stakeholders, in this case, the FKF and their sponsors, not getting the value that they should get in terms of exposure. But you just feel that this impasse, the hardline stances being adopted by the game's governing body in the country should come to an end, because like we said last week, like we keep saying, we need each other to get the news out to. If it doesn't happen, I think at the end of the day, the biggest loser will be the governing body and the players. But be resolved going forward. And going forward, let's talk about one forward who has been engineering moves in Japan. Michael Olunga, I think his move to the Qatari champions Al Duhail is all but confirmed. It's a big bunny move. Dennis Olech urged him to take the money and play in the Middle East. Is it good or bad advice, Richie?
I think we covered this briefly last week. We said that he was focused on moving his career to a different league because he wants to have more playing time and also maybe earn a few extra bucks. But personally, I don't think it's a good move going into Dubai. We know what happens in that league, because again, the humidity and the level of competition is not as at the level of the European leagues that we were hoping that he would transfer to. But as Oliet said, maybe he's looking more at his pocket of improving his fortunes. That I think is a bit unfortunate, but who knows? It's to himself.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've been in quite a number of forums who have also been discussing Olunga's move to Qatar. Of course, there are those who are questioning why he's gone to Qatar and not Europe. But like I said last week, I think for him, he needs to do what's best. Remember, he is on the wrong side of 20. He's 26 going on 27. He has, in my opinion, nothing else to prove. Also, when you look at it, sports people, their longevity isn't quite, I mean, their lifespan isn't quite that long. So I think he's in that phase of his career where it's all about making the money and securing his future. So based on that, I think it is the right move. No European club was calling for him. So go where the money is, be comfortable, just continue doing your thing, because at the end of the day, Richie, he's getting paid to do what he loves.
Okay, I think indeed then we have to agree with that, because at the end of the day, he has to pay bills, he has to make things happen for his career, and also just basically meet his day-to-day needs. And that's why you're professional. You want to make some extra money, you want to make some extra bucks, and get more playing time. Let's see what happens in Qatar then.
Exactly, and still stuck in Japan. There's a guy who in must have been 1993, Kazuyoshi Miura, King Kazu. He played in the inaugural edition of the J League so many years ago. He's turning 54 this year. He has just signed a contract extension with his club, J League 2 side FC Yokohama. How's about that for longevity?
Again, coming to what we are talking about, Olunga and Oliech, if you look at what Miura has achieved, 54 years, that's a lifetime in sport, in any sport, whether it's rugby, whether it's football. And I think he has very good genes to be able to be kicking a ball at his age and still be competitive in whatever league, whether it's the J League or the J2. And I think that's then what we should look at. If you have that ability to last longer in the pitch or in your respective games, why not keep that boot? Don't hang up the boots yet. Be an inspiration, because I think King Kazu has been an inspiration to a generation of footballers in Japan, and also to a huge following of people who are past that prime age of their playing careers but are still continuing to play the game.
Definitely, though, on a lighter note, you'd also say that he's 1 year away from the Kenyan age, and that is for formal. It's are suffering from things like gout, high blood pressure, diabetes, heart conditions. Here's a 54-year-old man still kicking the ball, getting paid for it, getting endorsements. He probably tapped into the fountain of youth at some point.
I think it has something to do with the culture, because if you look at the Japanese culture, we have a huge population of people past their 50s, 60s, or even to their 90s and into their hundreds. I think, as you say, it's the fountain of youth, but it also goes back to what you indulge with when you're starting off your career or in your youth. And I think that's something that then maybe footballers or professional people need to look at. What is the secret behind their longevity, in Japan or in that particular league?
Yeah, it's quite an inspirational story when we take away all the light-hearted humor, and obviously one that goes down in the history books. And just for the records, this is going to be his 36th season as a professional. 36 seasons as a professional.
Wow.
Cristiano Ronaldo is 36 years old. Zlatan Ibrahimovic is 39. So he started playing when Zlatan was 3. Started playing when not Ibrahimovic, but Ronaldo was probably a few months old or not even born. So, I mean, if you look at it in that context, it's quite an amazing feat. Now, let's come back home to Kenya, and there was yet another amazing feat. Our Kenyan champions, Gor Mahia, bundled out of the CAF Champions League 8-1 on aggregate. They lost the return leg in Nairobi by 2-1. They went ahead in that game, but eventually capitulating under the pressure from CR Belouizdad. The big question is, does Kenya forget about competing in the Continental Showcase until we sort out our domestic issues first?
I think precisely as you say, if we brag about ourselves being champions in the local league, but the minute we cross borders, we are not able to match up our regional or continental clubs. Then it begs to, why should we then be saying that we are a huge or we are competitive at that level? If we cannot sort out our issues here locally, let's not think that miracles will happen when we go to CAF or CECAFA, and that is reflective of what has happened to Gor Mahia. We sort of have gotten our act together, KPL and FKF, but then it's about time that we start putting those things and structures in place. All these leagues that all these teams that are featuring the continental showpiece. If you look at Congo, if you look at Nigeria, if you look at Algeria, as you see, Belouizdad, their federations purposefully make sure that those teams that are representing them are very well structured and have everything that they can do to make them succeed in that level. I don't think they have gotten that support locally for Gor Mahia or any other team that is representing us at that level. And that then comes back to the FKF officials and also to the club officials at Gor Mahia.
And it's quite interesting that you talk about these other countries and the efforts that they are making. You realize that it is a whole collective effort. I mean, the nations know the philosophies that they want, a style of play that they want their teams to be playing in. They start identifying and nurturing talent very young. In fact, I was reading yesterday on some country in North Africa, I'm not too sure if it is Morocco or Algeria, who are opening up an academy that is initially going to target players born between 2006 and 2007. That is your 13 and 14-year-olds. And obviously, there's a long-term development pathway that is being planned for them. So it's all about not building Rome in a day, but actually identifying who are going to be national team material in the years to come and how to progress them through the various age groups. Quite progressive thinking, if you look at it that way, something that is being applied in many other sports, and it's great to see the African countries, especially in the west and central and north part of the continent, actually adopting it. Only a matter of time before we get that done here. We have to be optimistic, but in being optimistic, we have to also wait for the local situation to get a lot more organized, bring a whole lot more structure and a lot more professionalism. Talking about professionalism, Gor, I don't know whether to, anyway, let me just go ahead. They've appointed a new coach, Carlos Manuel Vaz Pinto from Portugal. He was announced as the head coach on Sunday, 10th of January 2021. He takes charge of a side that is now going to play in the CAF Confederations Cup playoffs against Zambia's Napsa Stars, a side that is currently sitting 16th in the KPL. Is he the man to turn things around for Gor Mahia?
I think it's a good thing to have foreign coaches coming to the local league and trying to add a bit of professionalism or something, a different tactic to the game. But as you say, if you don't sort out your house first, even if you bring Arsene Wenger into that team, then you won't achieve any miracles. And I think this is where the Gor Mahia officials need to look at. The previous coach was supposed to take the team to the CAF games. He did not have the proper certification, hence they had to sit him out and use Sami Pamzo Mongo. That was a bit tragic at that level. If anything, I think CAF was very they gave him leeway to be able to replace the technical team. But then if you look at it professionally, then you're not supposed to be having such situations where you're changing coaches in between games or just when you're about to feature in a game like that. And we wish Carlos all the best as he comes in, but then he'll need a little bit more than just miracles.
Yep, and now let's shift gears. Let's move from football to athletics. Kenya looks to host the 2025 World Athletic Championships. The Kenya government has submitted a letter of intent. The deadline is September, with the winning bid being announced in December. Big question is whether Kenya is capable of hosting an event of that magnitude.
I think we are primed for good things if the sort of relationship that Athletics Kenya has with the IAAF is anything to go by. But then again, as we say, let's put first things first. How many stadiums do we have that can host such an international showpiece? I think it's only one or two, Nyayo Stadium and Moi Kasarani. If then we want to look at that perspective, then we need to put a lot of things in place, because it's not just the stadium that are going to be looked at when proposing this bid. There's hosting facilities from hotels to medium tier hotels, from travel and connections to the airport and arrivals and exits, and also just the whole health and these issues that we are dealing with the pandemic right now. So it's for the government to make sure that they have all the proper structures in place. Then Athletics Kenya will just supplement their technical bid with what they can do, hosting an international event. But I don't see why I should not host it. We have the under 19 coming up in. It's under 19 or under 21 coming up in June.
It should be the under 20s.
Yes, we can go for the big one, and that's in 4 years. Why not?
Yeah, definitely. And also looking at it, there should be a legacy that comes out of hosting these kind of events. Look at what the 2010 World Cup did for South Africa. Not only did it gift South Africa with stadia as well, but it boosted their infrastructure, their transport systems all got an upgrade. We got things like the Gautrain, which now operates from the airport to the CBD in Johannesburg, amongst other things. And those are the kind of legacy things that we want to see as a result of hosting such events, because eventually it not only boosts the country's profile, but it also is supposed to better the well-being of the citizenry in the long term, in terms of the opportunities that will come, for example, vending and so on and so forth, closer to the event and after the event, but also, like we said, the legacy programs. Now, moving on to other sports news, SportPesa announces their jackpot winner, 12 million shillings for that winner. They're stuttering back to life, or did the horse bolt? And also, what does this mean for betting in Kenya?
I think it's an interesting perspective when, last year a lot of flack was born on betting companies in Kenya. There were new tax regimes introduced. And as late as last year, I think as the close of the year was coming, the local revenue authority introduced a new digital tax, and I think this will be part of the things that affect betting as well. Out there of what betting companies can do and are doing in the country, but also it's also important to know that most of these, right now, if you look at the sponsorship figures in the last 2 to 3 years, betting companies have been contributing about 70% of sponsorship fees. What does that mean if we have the sports persons who have been sort of scaled down the operations? How does that impact sport? And then what then can we look at as an alternative means of sponsorship for sport?
Yeah, and in other global news, the Dakar Rally continues in Saudi Arabia. Richie, how is it going so far?
I've been looking at some of the highlights. I think it's very tight, because then we have situations where individuals and both the motorcycles and the cars have been asked not to get service in between the legs. So it's a very tight one. So in case you lose your parts between a leg, between one stage and the next, you either have to run with a punctured tire or with a broken part. And it's very tight at the top. I think Carlos Sainz is still is one of the leaders from the last I checked. I'll have some updates, I think, later. But I think it's very interesting. The last day of the race is on the 15th. That's on Friday, coming Friday. So anything goes in this rally. When you're in the desert situation, and we have such situations where you can't service the car or the motorcycle, it's anyone's race.
Well, we are taking a short break. We will be back with the second part of Timeout Podcast. Remember, you can follow us on Twitter at Timeout Kenya Pod and Instagram at Timeout Kenya. My name is Michael Kwambo, and my co-host is Richard Wanjohi.
Thank you, and we're glad that you have joined us.
And we are back for the second part of Timeout Podcast, and we bring you the stats for the week, starting with the number of goals that was scored in the match between Kariobangi Sharks and Gor Mahia. 7 goals. Richie, when was the last time you saw a Gor Mahia side concede 4 goals locally?
I think it's a long time ago, and if it ever happened, I think there was a riotous, crowd that ran them out of town or out of the game. And again, as I said before, it will take a miracle or more than a miracle for the new technical team to work miracles and work something that will make sure the team is back to winning ways. It's a bit tight for them because then you have both the continental challenges that you have to work on. And I think they might be playing in CECAFA at some point later in the year. But then that means then the team has a lot of games to catch up on, both locally and at the regional level.
And it was quite a high-scoring weekend in the FKF Premier League. Sofapaka putting 4 past Mathare United, who managed to, although you have to give it to Mathare United, they were playing their first game of the season after being reinstated in the league following a decision by the Sports Disputes Tribunal to stay their expulsion. They and Zuke Richo had been expelled because of the opposition to the broadcast deal that has been signed between the Football Kenya Federation and Star Times. So coming back to 3-2 in that game, but eventually losing 4-2, I think it was something, but still a high-scoring weekend. Now let's go back to the issue of betting. We're talking about opinions, and most of the sponsors of the teams in the Kenyan Premier League right now are betting companies. Indeed, even the title sponsor of the Premier League is a betting company. So the big question is, are these the only sponsors available to major sports?
Yeah, and I think that's something that we need to look at, because what happened as far back as 2014 when SportPesa came into the scene and they became huge investors in sport. Back then they started off with I think a Super 8, and also gradually built up into grassroots games, and also the local leagues and regional leagues, all the way to shirt sponsorships in the UK, and as far much as going to Formula One. If we look at what revenues betting companies have been attracting, way high, compared to most of the companies that are looking to sponsor sport. That's not the issue. The issue is that they would be the only ones sponsoring sport, and then again, when the mat or the plug is pulled on them, like what happened to SportPesa, it kills a whole league or a whole discipline in sport. Then what are the alternatives that then some of these sporting disciplines can have? We have seen a case study, typical case study, what happened to SportPesa last year.
And then, again, still on that question of whether they are the only sponsors available to major sports, I do know that there were concessions made in the laws to allow corporate entities to give back to sport, but still we are not seeing this happening. Is this because we have failed to package our sport as a viable enough product to make it attractive to other organizations away from betting funds?
I think, yeah, again, if you talk about, our sports organization and our sports associations, they need to put their acts together, because then again, I will not, as an investor or even as a corporate, put money where I cannot see any value or whatever visibility that I get from it. A good example is what happened to Oziklik Indogo, or this youth football tournaments that were being sponsored by Safaricom sometime in 2012 and 2013. Because of what issues that the FKF was having on the day, Safaricom pulled out and didn't sponsor football for almost 2 years. But they put their the game in order, and they have clear records, and they have all the structures in place, and good governance and laws, and reporting capabilities, just to show what is happening in the sport. Then, as an investor or as a corporate, I'll put my money in. And this is not just for CSR. Sorry, it will be an investment that I can say that, for example, I'm sponsoring an event so that I can be able to boost my sales or boost my brand awareness, and that is what is happening in other global scenarios. But for Kenyan sport, we need to really get our act together, and sports associations to make sure that they put their houses in order.
Okay, still on this matter, tax regimes have been introduced to digital entrepreneurship as well. So the big question is, do tax and new digital laws make it a viable business in the long term, given that betting in Kenya is largely based on digital platforms?
Yeah, it's interesting that some of these tax or revenue collectors they look at the goose when it has laid the golden egg instead of the other way around, getting the goose before it lays the egg and nurturing it to grow. What am I saying is that entrepreneurs will take advantage of situations of lax tax regimes or revenue loopholes. So what happens is that once you start, putting such laws in place and punitive measures, then it now reduces the attraction of what was previously a very lucrative area. Betting has been one of the biggest, revelations in the last 5 to 6 years in Kenya. Unfortunately, because of those weak laws, is that a lot of betting companies took advantage of situations that they ought not to have taken advantage of. That meant that there was a lot of underage gambling. Even when you gamble, then there was, people being auctioned and being, their names being put up in the CRB or credit reference bureaus. That meant that a lot of populace or people in the population suffering from gambling or betting, fatigue and also just, losing their monies. But even if you look at it backwards, then if we had measures in place, because betting is there across the board. If you look at South Africa, if you look at the US or even the UK, part of their sponsorship or CSR for casinos or some of these betting companies, they give back to sport. They invest in sport that can then be introduced again here as a way of motivating these companies, not just to push their people to bet more and gamble more, but just put that into a CSR activity. That can be a way to go.
What are the best practices for betting and sponsorship?
Again, as I said, if the tax regime or the tax authorities and the different people who are investors in betting had put these measures in place even before they started setting up the companies, or sought audience with the betting licensing, betting control and licensing board, as well as the respective government authorities, then they would have a situation where we don't have punitive measures that sort of put them out of business, or they have to keep pulling the plug and they're on and off every so often. It's also good that they put a moratorium on the number of companies that they can have pushing such facilities or pushing betting practices in the country. It is also important that they put again time limits, for example, because we see a lot of young or youth engaging in gambling, in school hours or beyond the school hours. It's important that we put sort of time or curfews on such situations so that we don't have situations of people running out of school or out of education to get engaged in betting. For sponsorship, I think it's just, again, as you said, CSR activities for the corporates. If you put a certain percentage of their winnings or their earnings into CSR, and we had a fund that was supposed to come up, the Sports Kenya body, that was supposed to be the Kenya Sports Fund, if I'm not wrong. Part of the winnings or the taxes were supposed to go into that. I don't know what happened to that. No one gives us any updates on what monies they're collecting or where they're getting the monies from, or whether they're grants from the government.
Well, that's quite interesting. Those have been great opinions from Richie on betting in Kenya. We're moving into the countdown, things to look forward to in 2021. We have the World Relay Championships on the 1st and 2nd of May 2021. And then we have the Africa Cup of Nations in Cameroon from June to July 2021. Richie, your take on the World Relay Championships happening on the first 2 days of May?
I think that's one of the biggest, bonanzas that IAWF has given to the world of athletics and also the world of sport, because relays in any sporting event are very, very entertaining. Races. You have the mixed races where you have the men and women. You have the short races where it's the 4x100 and 4x400. You also have the long ones like the 4x1 by 1500 meters. all these provide a huge cocktail of entertainment and a way to keep your audiences engaged. And this would be a good way for us to get back into, the crowd sports and also just to get entertained on the athletics field. Locally, we had I think the national championships trialing the past weekend. I think we had the Kenya Police and a couple of discipline forces at the Nyayo Stadium. I think they were sort of testing what would happen in case they have the national trials and just who to select for the World Relay Championships.
And then we do have the Africa Cup of Nations taking place in Cameroon between the months of July, actually starting in June and ending in July. Harambee Stars are in a tight group, in a tight race. Do you think they'll be able to qualify for Africa's continental showpiece?
It's a tight one. Personally, I wish they would succeed and get to participate. But then, if the local scene is anything to go by, I don't think we can't promise heaven where there's none. So we might not make the continental showpiece at that level. But then it's 6 months away, and what we can see what happens. I think by the next two games, and hopefully they qualify. Again, with the pandemic issues, there are still huge spikes in the extreme in the north and in the south. I think the tropics are still having a bit of a containment. I don't know whether it's a natural containment or it's just that the governments are not tracking these cases. But I think hopefully by June we'll have the vaccines in, and hopefully then the countries can be able to play the continental games at Cameroon.
Transitions. It's been a sad week in the world of sport, especially for the older generation of lovers of rallying, and in particular the Safari Rally. Giant Shah, that was a household name in the Safari Rally and during the Kenya National Rally Championships. The Arusha-based businessman and rally driver died over the weekend, aged 78. He was one of the best local drivers, won the KNRC between 1982 and 1984, and lately in his twilight years had been participating in the East Africa Classic Safari Rally. I think it's a huge loss to the fraternity. He goes in a lot of history, but he leaves us with great memories.
Yeah, and I think as we said in the start of the year, these are the people that we should have, utilized for the institutional memory and also for their participation in the Safari Rally. And if you look at his, engagements, he was one of the drivers at the local scene who was able to challenge even the WACS teams, because I remember he drove for the Datsun and the Nissan in the mid 80s and late 80s. And he was one of the guys who used to sort of mark up and wreck most of the local runs and just help out in mapping the different routes that they would be taking. It's unfortunate that we've lost him just before the Safari Rally comes back to Kenya, and it's a huge loss for the local running scene and also sports in general.
Now let's look into the crystal ball. And this week, Richie, Arnold Onyango, formerly of Mathare United, now based in the United States, he is a key member of the Rising Stars, Kenya's under-20 national team. Just tell us more about Arnold Onyango.
Yeah, Arnold Onyango has been an interesting talent. He comes from, he was in Leisa Hill Academy. He was also drafted by Mathare United in 2018. But because of his huge talent, I think he was able to apply and move straight to the US. I can't confirm the team yet, but I think he's doing that in the US currently. That means that he's something that you can look out for. He was one of the key and integral players in the Rising Stars team that beat Sudan in December in the Sakafa club, in the Sakafa under-20 game. And that means that, it's talent that we are looking out for the Harambee.
Yeah, well, we seem to have lost a minute. Hoping he'll be back soon.
Hello. Sorry, my connection has. Hello. Sorry, where did I lose you? Hi, Michael. Can you hear me now? You can hear me now? Hello?
Yes, I'm back. I'm here. We were talking about Arnold Onyango, football talent. Arnold Onyango, formerly of Mathare United, now based in the United States, key in Rising Stars, the Kenya under-20 national team.
Yes, so I was saying, he's been one of the integral players in the Rising Stars Kenya national team for the under-20s. He was also part of the team that played Sudan and beat them 2-1 in November, December. And as we say, we're looking for such talent to build the Harambee Stars and the national team. And for him to play straight in the US, it means that he's a talent that we should be looking out for in the future.
Wow, and it will be great to see how Arnold Onyango's progression continues over the years. We see a lot of young talent coming through, but many of them fall off along the way. We just pray that this is someone we can watch from gun to tape, as we are watching right now with Michael Olunga. Literally, we've watched Olunga from his days at Upper Hill, Thika United, Tusker, Gor Mahia, and now making the big money move to Al Duhail in Qatar. And I think for Arnold Onyango, the same, but it's what we consistently talk about, nurturing talent, guiding this talent as well. Dennis Oliech, for me, I feel didn't get the fairy tale ending he deserved. I just feel that he had so much talent but didn't have the best of guidance. So with the likes of Arnold Onyango, Tyler Onyango playing in Everton, definitely something that we can do. And Richie, it's been an amazing time recording this episode of a Timeout podcast. Thank you for your insights. Thank you to the audience for listening in. Remember, you can follow us on Twitter at Timeout Kenya Pod, Instagram, Timeout Kenya. Richie, your closing remarks before we take a timeout?
I think it's high time that sport gets back into action. I think, as we have seen, most of the major leagues have said they won't stop or pause for the pandemic. They continue very aggressive testing and also very aggressive ways of containing their players and their teams. Let's get out and enjoy sport.
Exactly, those are my sentiments too, especially now that we have politicians enjoying their politics. Why can't we enjoy our sport?
Let's take the time out.
And that's it. We are taking the time out.